Welcome to Old Celtic Tales by E.M. Wilmot Buxton. Please like, share, and follow us.
The Quest of the Seven Champions, Part 5. How Prince Kilhugh Won His Bride. While Arthur and his knights were discussing which of the impossible tasks should next be undertaken, it so happened that a certain prince named Gwythyr, who was also one of Arthur's knights, was walking over a mountain in his own country, the land of the dawn. And as he walked, deep in thought, he heard a sad little cry. Up and down he looked, but nothing could he see that could explain such mournful cry. But presently it came again from under his very feet, and there he saw an ant-hill. Inside the ant-hill, the little creatures were wailing piteously, for the heath on the mountainside was afire, and in a short time their kingdom would be all in a blaze. Then Prince Gwythyr drew his sword and cut off the ant-hill at a blow, and threw it into a place of safety. "Our grateful thanks are thine," cried the ants. "Now tell us what we can do for thee in return, Prince Gwythyr of the land of the dawn." The prince pondered a moment, and then replied, "All the world knows that Kilhugh, one of the companions of Arthur, seeking the hand of the fair Alwyn, is required by her father to bring him the 9 bushels of flax seeds sown in his field to make the wedding veil for his bride. If 1 grain is missing, the marriage will be forbidden, and, though we are Arthur's knights, not one of us can find these tiny seeds. Now, can ye do this task for me?" "That will we joyfully," cried the ants, and they made their way in haste to the field of Thornogre Thistlehair, chief of the giants. When evening began to fall, they returned to the land of the dawn, where Prince Gwythyr had set up a bushel measure. Up its sides they climbed, each with a seed in its mouth, and 9 times they filled the measure until only 1 seed was wanting. "'Tis well," they cried. "The lame emmet has not yet come home." And before nightfall, the lame emmet toiled up to the bushel measure and dropped in the last seed. So the 9 bushels of flax seed were taken to the castle of Arthur and given to Prince Kilhugh. Then said King Arthur, "Let us now go to Ireland to seek for the cauldron of Crusword, the steward of Odgar, the Irish king." Now this cauldron, as you will remember, was of such a kind that when food for a coward was cooked in it, the food remained as it was at first. But if for a brave man it was ready for eating directly it was placed in the pot. So it was very precious, and when Arthur's request for it was received by Odgar, Crusword replied in wrath, "Not a glimpse of my cauldron shall he obtain, even if it would give him all the blessings in the world, much less will I give it him altogether." Then Arthur called together his men of war, and sailed over the stormy seas to Ireland. When the people saw him in battle array, they were afraid, and counseled Odgar to receive him peaceably. So Odgar sent friendly messages and invited him to a banquet in his palace. Now when the banquet was over, Odgar was about to give presents to his guests, but Arthur would take nothing. He wanted naught, he said, but the cauldron of Crusword. When Crusword heard this, he thundered out, "Nay, King Arthur, I will never give it to thee. If thou couldst have it for the asking, it would have been given at the bidding of King Odgar, not at thine." When Bedivere heard this rude reply, he was very angry, and rushing upon him, seized the cauldron, and set it on the shoulders of Arthur's cauldron-bearer. Then swords were drawn, and the men of Arthur's host fell upon Crusword and his followers, and slew them. Thus they carried off the cauldron, and bore it, full of Irish gold, back to the island of the mighty. After this adventure they set forth to obtain the charmed balsam that was guarded by the jet-black sorceress, daughter of the snow-white sorceress, at the Brook of Sorrow, on the edge of the Twilight Land. And when they approached the dismal cavern where she dwelt, King Arthur was joined by Gwyn of the Twilight Land, and Gwythyr from the land of the dawn, who, knowing the sorceress and her power, advised that 2 of his attendants should first be sent into the cave. Directly the first appeared, the sorceress seized him by the hair and threw him down and trampled on him. The second dragged her away from him but could do nothing against her, for she kicked them and beat them and thrust them forth again. Then Arthur would have gone in himself, but Prince Gwyun and Prince Gwythyr prevented him, saying it would not be a fitting adventure for so great a king, and persuaded him to send in the 2 tall brothers. But these 2 were so ill-treated by the sorceress that they came out more dead than alive, and had to be lifted on to their horses. Then, when he saw his followers so ill-used, nothing could keep Arthur back. He rushed into the cave, and with one stroke of his dagger, killed the wicked sorceress, while Kai carried off the charmed balsam. They next set out to hunt the boar-headed branch-breaker, but soon they heard that no man could pluck out the tusk from the living head of this terrible animal, but Odgar, King of Ireland. With some difficulty they persuaded him to accompany them, but at length the huntsmen gathered together, with him at their head, and a great hunt for the boar began. The swiftest dogs could not bring the animal to bay, until at length Arthur's own hound, Cavall, brought him to the ground, and Odgar rushed up to pull out the tusk, but he would have been killed had not Kai been there to strike the branch-breaker down directly. Odgar had plucked it out. There yet remained to seek out the jeweled scissors and comb that were between the ears of Bursting Boar, the wide-waster. Now, this Bursting Boar had laid waste a great part of Ireland, so that all men went in terror of him, and that the heroes might not be misled about the curious things said to lie between his ears, Merlin was sent to Ireland to seek him out and see if it were as the giant had said. So Merlin tracked Bursting Boar to his den on Cold Blast Ridge, and, having changed himself into a bird, flew down into a thicket close by. From thence he could see the creature lying on the ground, with his 7 young boars at his side, and between his ears twinkled the jewels of the scissors and the comb. Then Merlin thought it was a sad thing that the heroes should lose their lives for such things, and determined to try to carry them off himself. So he flew upon the head of Bursting Boar, and tried to snatch up the razor, but all he really got was a great bristle. Then Bursting Boar rose up in a great rage, foaming at the mouth. He could see no one, but a fleck of the poisonous foam fell upon Merlin, and hurt him so that he never quite recovered. When he heard this news, Arthur gathered together such a number of brave knights and squires that the Irish feared he was about to attack their land. But when he told them he had come to deliver them from the dreaded Bursting Boar, their joy knew no bounds. And so it was arranged that those Irish who had joined his host should first attack the boar. Then, if he still lived, he should be attacked by Arthur's own knights. And if by that time he were not slain, Arthur should himself hunt him on the 3rd day. But the 1st day and the 2nd saw the boar triumphant. And when Arthur took his turn, he fought for 9 days and nights, without even wounding the creature or one of his cubs. At the end of that time, all the knights besought Arthur to tell them the secret about the boar, which all this time he had kept. Then Arthur told them that the creature had once been a king, but for his sins and his great pride had been changed into a boar. And he sent Uriel to confer with him concerning the jeweled comb and scissors. But when Uriel spoke gently to him, bidding him deliver these up at the request of Arthur, the boar grew very fierce, and said, "Not only shall Arthur never even see these jewels, but I with my young ones will go forthwith and harry the land of Arthur, doing all the hurt to it that we can." When they heard this news, all the host arose at dawn to prevent them leaving Ireland. But when they looked towards the sea, there was the boar with his young ones swimming far away to the coast of Britain. And before the king could cross the Irish Sea, the boars had landed at Milford Haven and destroyed every living thing in the neighborhood. Then terror fell on all the land, and eagerly men looked for Arthur to come to their aid, who, when he arrived, set out at once with a crowd of mighty huntsmen to kill the beasts. But it was exceeding hard to find the boar, though his tracks were well marked by the ruin of flocks and men, and when they did come up with him, he slew with his mighty tusks a full 6 of Arthur's followers, and dashed off to a mountain top where they lost all sign of him. Neither man nor dog could tell whither he had disappeared. At last they heard that the boars were ravaging a valley some miles away. Thither they followed, and after a hard struggle they killed the young boars one by one. But after a long pursuit, Bursting Boar vanished again, so completely this time that the host returned to Cornwall, thinking he must have left the land. Scarcely had Arthur entered his palace when a breathless messenger rushed into the hall. "Arise!" he cried. "The boar is ruining thy domain, trampling down towers and towns, uprooting trees, and killing men and cattle on all sides, and he is now coming over the mountains to do the same in Cornwall." Then Arthur made this speech to his followers, Men of the island of the mighty, Bursting Boar, the wide waster, has slain many of our bravest men, but he shall never enter Cornwall while I live. You may do as you please, but for me, I will no longer hunt him, but shall meet him face to face." Forthwith he posted men at various spots to prevent the creature from landing, and then rode up to the river's brink. As he arrived suddenly with a great rush, Bursting Boar sprang out of the forest and tried to cross on his way to Cornwall. But Arthur and his companions drove their horses into the water and followed him, and somehow or other seized him by his 4 feet as he scrambled up the bank and flung him back into the river, and as he fell, Mabon, the son of Modron, caught the razor from behind one of his ears, and Kenneder the Wild snatched the scissors from behind the other. Yet, even while they did this, Bursting Boar upreared himself from the water, dashed up the river bank, and disappeared. Then all the host followed, but they only came up to him when he had got well into Cornwall. Then a desperate fight began. By harassing him all day, they managed to keep him from ravaging the land, and when he tried to get into Devon, they were too many for him. Over the moors, down the combes, up the hills, they chased him, till at length, being desperate, he turned and made for the sea. In he plunged, but, though the pursuing horses stayed their feet at the water's edge, those 2 good hounds, Rassipace and Boundoft, who had followed him so long, could not hold themselves back, but plunged in after him into the waves. For long the heroes watched his course, with those 2 fierce dogs close behind him. But from that day to this, nothing more has ever been heard of either Bursting Boar or the 2 hounds. Now, all the impossible tasks had been fulfilled, and joyfully did Prince Kilhugh ride to the giant's castle to claim his bride. But Thornogray Thistlehair looked on in gloomy silence as the marvels were spread out before him. He allowed himself to be shaven and combed, but though he could not refuse to give the prince his daughter's hand, he openly said that he did it with no good will. Then the herdsman's son stood forth and cried, "O giant, 23 of my brothers thou hast foully slain, and defrauded my father of his heritage. For these things thou shalt surely die by my hand today." So he dragged him by his hair to the castle battlements, and being very strong, he slew him there and cut off his head. And the castle was given to the herdsman, but Kilhugh married fair Alwyn, and they were happy ever after as long as they both lived. That's the end of this story, brought to you by Schaefer Media Enterprises. Please check back for more exciting stories.
Independent short films are a welcome change from corporate entertainment. These films often press the boundaries of filmmaking, giving you a visual and intellectual experience that you can't get in mainstream stuff. The best place to find short independent films is Appealing TV, available on Roku and Amazon Fire. Find out more at appealingtv.com.
The Ultimate Question is a fully acted and produced audio fantasy story. When a young boy is found on a battlefield, it sets into motion a series of events that will have potentially catastrophic results unless that young boy, now a young man, can solve the puzzle that his mentor left him before he died. The Ultimate Question is available wherever you find podcasts and audiobooks. Visit uqstory.com for more information.
Please visit SchaeferMediaEnterprises.com for more of our projects and services.